Hello and welcome to the Commission Files. I'm Will Leach. We're at Commission Christian Radio in Dundonald outside Belfast in Northern Ireland. No Kerry Gregg this time. Our best wishes to Kerry. She just can't be with us at the moment. Now here's a fairly direct question. Where do you work? What do they do there? And here's why I'm asking. Lots of you are teachers or firefighters or police officers or civil servants, faith workers or retired, carers, clergy, creative content producers or a mixture of those things. Lots of you aren't. But most people work for companies one way or another. Most people work in the business world because that's how society works. Money really doesn't grow on trees, and basic commerce is how we all end up with stuff to live on, how taxes get paid, how we've roads and hospitals and bin collections or whatever. Lots of Christians live and work in the world of business. So here at Commission, we've been wondering, well, who looks after them? Making a business plan these days is no easy job. Economies go up and down, circumstances change, sometimes there's no warning. We've had Brexit, the Westminster Protocol, the New Deal there recently. We've had a new US president who's keen on tariffs. We've had COVID, cost of living crisis, a brutal war in Europe. As I said, making a business work these days is no easy job. So how do you bring God's kingdom to the marketplace? My guest this time is Daniel Jackson, a businessman and entrepreneur, but also the director of the Genesis Network, founded about 4 years ago, but already being noticed and making a difference. Daniel, welcome to the Commission Files and to our beloved Studio 2. Welcome.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for the invite today.
What's the Genesis Network?
So the Genesis Network is a community of Christian business people who seek to authentically live out their faith in Jesus in the marketplace, in the place that we spend the most of our time.
And in practice, what does that mean?
In practice, the Genesis Network builds a community of like-minded business people. That could be entrepreneurs, directors, it could be leaders within a certain business. It brings them together to be accountable with each other, to support each other, to bounce things around. It then looks to equip those people, giving them practical tools, skills and insights into what it is to connect your faith into your business. And then we look to help them pour out into the world around them to bring the good news of Jesus to people, whether that's people in their supply chain, whether that's their customers, whether that's people they have influence with in the marketplace, how that then pours out into the world around them.
So you meet regularly, you've groups of people who meet in small, bigger groups locally. How does it work?
Yeah, so the lifeblood of Genesis Network is small regional hubs that meet once or twice a month in different locations. We started off with one when we launched in 2021 in Lisburn. We've now got a selection of hubs all around Northern Ireland with a vision for the island of Ireland, and we're going to be growing into the south of Ireland this year. So those small groups of Christians in the business place meeting on that monthly basis or sometimes twice a month to encourage and support each other, to pray with each other, to talk about things together that maybe people outside of the business sphere won't understand, all the challenges that they go through, all the things and the difficulties, particularly around how to intersect faith into the things they do. So they're there to be support, encouragement, accountable to each other. And that's the lifeblood of Genesis, meeting in those groups once a month. And then that pours in. We've lots of other activities, events, programs that we run outside of that. But the lifeblood is the regional hubs, and that's an all-island vision for Ireland.
See, that gets to the nub of the question that's formed in my mind, which is to make all that happen, and it sounds great. Typical journalist, I'm going to be negative. What was wrong? What was missing? Why did you see the need? Why did you think we really got to do this?
Well, I think there's probably a mixture of my own lived experiences that led us to founding the Genesis Network in 2021, and many other Christians in business that I had begun to build relationships or friendships with, that common themes and stories were all coming out. So my own experience was that within the church context, I hadn't been maybe made to feel that what I did outside of in my Monday to Friday, that it was really significant or important, and that the effort was always placed towards channeling me into church activities that maybe didn't quite suit me, whenever my skill sets and interests and the things that I was good at were outside of the outside of Sunday. So I sort of felt this clash where I didn't quite fit into all maybe the church leadership groups and things that I was trying to get involved in, and there wasn't an overlap into what I did the rest of the week. And as I began to explore that for myself and wrestle with that for myself and build relationships within the business community, many people were finding that they didn't maybe feel like their church or their leadership in their church was relating, or they were able to talk about the issues that they were facing. How do we make payroll this month? We've just lost a client. We've, things that is very niche, problems that are niche to go through for someone that's a leader in a business. So that led to the thought, particularly around Genesis, how do we support people that are in the business place, that are essentially at the controls of power in a nation? Because if the businesses in the nation are being led well, or flourishing, that's going to flow through to everyone in a nation and the flourishing of that nation. So how do we make sure that we support those Christians in business to actually wrestle these things together, bounce these things around together, support each other, and talk through the real issues that we face day to day?
Yeah, I want to poke at that a bit. That relationship between the business world and the faith world, the church world, the Christian community world. You mentioned that sometimes there was that lack of connection between what you did Monday to Friday. I think probably the reality could be, well, let's ask you about it, that sometimes churches are happy to deal with you when they're looking for money, quite frankly.
So we always have that joke that, we maybe felt like we didn't fit into churches necessarily very well, or that our work was recognised until the sports hall floor needed relayed, and all of a sudden,
or the new halls, or whatever.
So there was that disconnect, and I guess it goes. And to say there's lots of great examples of churches that aren't like that, but we've just found many people that their own stories were that they're what they spent the most of their time doing, building their business, working in their business, week in, week out, wasn't necessarily recognised as something that was important in society, never mind important to God. And as we dived in even further, I guess, to looking at, well, what does the Bible say about work? And that's part of why the name of the movement is the Genesis Network. There's so much in Genesis, in the book of Genesis, that lays a foundation for work. And, it was a real eye-opening time for me, even when I started diving into that, and I felt God was stirring on me that this was to be called the Genesis Network. And as we dived into that, even in Genesis 2, and the Hebrew word avodah used, which describes work, worship and service all into one word. And that was a real eye-opener for me, where work for me and business for me had been made to feel like a secondary thing to leading in a ministry or leading in a church or something like that. But whenever I realised in myself that veil between work and ministry was actually something that maybe generations of Christian culture had built, rather than when you come back to the Bible and what does the Bible say about it, that was really eye-opening and empowering to me to view my business, my work, as an act of worship and service to God, and a way to pay the bills and employ people and all of that. But thinking of it more than just that, and actually being something that's important to God and something that we're even called to.
How would you consider yourselves? Are you an organisation in the Genesis Network, or are you a way of thinking, or a culture, or a movement, or something?
We're a registered charity with the Charity Commission. So we have a board of trustees, and we have a leadership team and governance in place, and all of those things that you have to do.
Yes.
And within that, then we're a movement, we're a family, a community. I don't know what the best word to describe it is, but we're definitely a community of peers that are all seeking to live out our faith authentically for Jesus in the marketplace in the island of Ireland.
Do you find then that the people like-minded people who've had that disconnect you were talking about, are just incredibly relieved to have other people to talk about, to say, I know, I felt the same so often?
Yes, absolutely. It's the Genesis Network has definitely been a place of refuge and refilling for many people that going through all of the stresses and challenges that you do in the business world, and many of them going through it alone, whether they didn't have the support or accountability, or they didn't feel like they had people around them that necessarily could understand the pressures. And we had many people connected with the Genesis Network that were used to sharing their story a little bit with friends or family or people around them, and feeling that sort of glazed over look, which is not a bad thing. It's just, we're creating something where people who actually understand the day-to-day and what we go through can come together and be that support. And that's been a real encouragement for people so far.
No, I'm understanding what you're talking about, because I have friends who've left employment, gone to form their own business, and you ask how are things, and of course they tell you, well, I've got a real difficulty with this. We've had a big tax bill. We didn't see that coming quite that way. And I've got a receptionist and she's not well, and I don't know whether she's going to leave or not. I'm going to try and support her, but I need to have somebody at reception. All those things that most of us never have to deal with. And small, medium, big, somebody somewhere within an organisation is going to have to deal with it. Do you focus on people who specifically are in leadership roles or real positions of responsibility?
We focus on people in the business community that have some responsibility. So we look at whether that's a solo entrepreneur or self-employed person that makes their own decisions, whether that's a director within a business that has that buck stop with me responsibility, or it's someone in a senior leadership position in a business. We've other people within the network that fall into different areas within business outside of that, but generally speaking, people who are at the helm or in a position of responsibility within a business don't necessarily have to own the business, but within a position of responsibility is who we focus on.
Mm-hmm. And what about encouraging people to join you and be part of what you're doing? I mean, do Christian business people see what you want to do and immediately want to be a part of it? Is it hard to persuade them? Are they suspicious? Are they canny business people and think, what's in it for us? How does it tend to work out?
I think there's probably all of that. You know, some people hear about what we're doing and immediately it's like, this is what we've been looking for, you know, and we've had that many times that, you know, people have been going through all of those things that I've been describing and not knowing that there was anything out there that could help to support them and equip them. And it's been that thing. Lots of times there's people that get it, like the idea, are super busy, or, you know, you also have people that think, oh, I can go it alone, and that's fine too. So we just try and remain available as a space for people as and when they need the community and the support to get involved.
Well, you don't sit about either, and we're going to look at something you did. You had a large event earlier this year in the spring, just after Easter, about praying for our leaders in Northern Ireland. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so as I'd mentioned, we have the hubs, which are kind of the lifeblood of Genesis Network. It's the real where relationship and accountability and all of that is done, and where there's a lot of equipping done and that kind of thing. We also have a few events throughout the year that are larger events. So anything we do will fall into three aims: either engage, which is about building that community of peers in the business community in Ireland, or equip, where we'll then equip that community in things around faith and business and how that intersection works, and then explore, where we look for those people to pour out into the world around them, and we do things that help introduce people in the business place to Jesus. So this event that you're talking about, our Pray for Our Leaders event in partnership with Evangelical Alliance, was our third annual event in the Titanic Belfast, and the theme of that event, or the focus of that event, was one, to be a flag in the sand for faith and business in Northern Ireland, to say there's a Christian business community here that are serious, that are influential in this nation, and we believe in the power of prayer and take our faith seriously. It was also an opportunity to introduce people through that sort of public reach that we get with that event, to introduce people in that business place to Jesus. There is other peers, other people that you take seriously in the industries around you and leadership around you that have put their faith in Jesus and believe that that's the thing that adds most value to their life, and that's a commitment that they've made. So come and listen to what we have to say about that and why we found that important. And then thirdly, to cover our political leaders, our civic leaders in prayer, to let them know that we're covering them in prayer, to let them know that we're behind them as a Christian business community. We're not coming to stir them up and to pull them apart for things that we would like to see different. We're coming to say, look, we want to bless you, we want to encourage you, we believe in the power of prayer, and we're praying for you. So it was a really encouraging event, our third annual, almost 300 business leaders in the room, and we're looking forward and gearing up to next year already.
I was privileged to be there, and I got my breakfast as well.
Excellent.
So thank you for arranging that. There were a lot of people there who have no Christian faith. They know what they're coming to, or maybe slightly curious what they're coming to. What was the reaction? What's the general feedback? What's the turnout like? How many people do you get to come to that who think, oh, I'm going to be preached at, or whatever?
You know, I think we're careful. We're careful in the first instance to let guests that are coming know that it is a Christian prayer breakfast. We don't want to surprise them, by saying it's just a business and leadership breakfast and surprise them. We want to let them know this is what we're doing, but we want to be very clear in letting them know there'll be Christians in the room that are going to be praying, and we want those Christians and Christians in the audience to feel encouraged to go out of there and seek God in prayer for the things, the businesses they're involved in, the leaders around them. But we want people in the room that maybe aren't yet of faith, that maybe they're exploring or maybe they're not, but we want them to be inspired to consider, well, maybe faith could fit into my life as a leader. How would that look? And reflect on what they've heard that morning. And we're also very clear to say, if you're in the room because your biggest client has invited you along and you feel you need to be there and you think that this is nuts and that what a waste of time this is, well, we at least want you to feel blessed that there's a group of Christians in the business community that see you, that notice what you put in to our economy, that notice the sacrifice, that notice what it takes, and we just want you to feel blessed. Whether you believe that the prayers that we're bringing will have any value or not, we want you to be seen. So we try and cater for everyone in that anybody in the room, of faith or not faith, they're seen. We welcome what they do for this nation, and we want them to be blessed.
Now, all of that is fascinating. A praying life and a caring life and an empathetic life was modelled to all those people, but also they had the things of God pointed out to them. I mentioned earlier that business is tough in an unstable world, and a lot of social media and traditional media talk about a lack of good news just now, a lack of hope. Now, your keynote speaker at that event was Gavin Calver of Evangelical Alliance. So let's hear a little of what he had to say about hope.
And a couple of years ago, the word of the year was permacrisis, which is the idea of an endless cycle of chaos. And we've had that in recent times, haven't we? COVID, cost of living, war in Europe. I'm raising teenagers, and everyone always said that would be hard. They never said quite how hard it would be with the state of where the nation's at. At the end of the pandemic, I went on a BBC radio debate with two secular humanist academics. The problem with my job is people expect me to actually be cleverer than I am. I hide it so well. And I'm on this debate, and these two guys with brains the size of planets, at a time when the nation's never felt so hopeless, do nothing but make us feel worse about ourselves. Now, any of you that ever do media, I'm sure you'll do the same. If you haven't got anything to say, don't speak, because eventually they will directly address you. It came towards the end of the programme and the host said, "Reverend Calver, what do you think?" I said, I think it's really sad that these two guys with brains that would fit in the solar system, who are far cleverer than I could ever be, whose intellect I would long to have done nothing but make us feel worse about the situation in our nation at this time. You see, for me, hope is not an abstract concept. Hope has a name, and his name is Jesus.
Gavin Calver there. Now, I like, Daniel, that he's directly speaking of Jesus as the source of hope for the people who are there in that room, or could be the source of hope for people who have been invited there. That clearly mattered to you, that they got to hear something like Gavin was going to say there.
Yeah, I think when I take my personal life journey into consideration, whenever you know that hope is the thing that's carried you through the good times, the bad times, whenever you know that hope has been the thing that's been unshakable and the thing that's added the most value to your life, it's very hard not to want your peers, the people in your marketplace around you to know that hope, and they can choose whether they like the idea of that or they don't like the idea of it. But I suppose whenever you're selling something, if you like, that you've tried yourself and tested yourself and you know has added great value to you, it's much easier to share that with others than hold it back.
I didn't think about it at the time, but that room was full of people who know how to make a pitch and hear a pitch. And people know that preaching is and isn't that, because if the Holy Spirit doesn't convict people, nothing's going to happen. And yet, a sermon has to be a good sermon, or a talk, or a chat, or an observation. My word, Gavin's good at it. He went on to talk about the times we live in, what we're hearing from a lot of people Kerry and I interview in this studio, and also about a renewed interest in faith and the things of God. Here he is again.
We're living in an interesting time, aren't we? There's an opportunity right now for those of us who have Jesus to show those who don't what it means to have Jesus and face the same storms, but live through them differently. I admire so much every one of you that is living out your faith in the public square, and there is an opportunity for us to show what's different when you face the same challenges, but you do so with Jesus. Now, let's not mess around. We all walk with a limp, don't we? Let's not pretend that following Jesus means there's no pain. We all walk with a limp. And actually, I don't trust anyone that doesn't walk with a limp. If you don't walk with a limp, you're either delusional or you grew up in Disneyland. But as we walk with a limp, we hold on to the rock of ages, gaining the right perspective and keeping going.
I mentioned that I loved Gavin's directness. I also liked his willingness to be vulnerable, to talk, as he said there, about the storms of life which have affected him and his work and his family. And then he brought it home, really. Let's have one last listen.
You can lose everything and lose nothing because you still have Jesus. How do we lead in the storm? We hold on to the unchanging one. However chaotic it gets, whatever lies around the next corner, I'm profoundly grateful for the most common promise in the Bible. It's the most common promise in the Old and the New Testament alike. God says to his people, I am with you. So as we pray for our nation, as we pray for our leaders, I pray they will also know this truth themselves, that they will know the enduring presence of the Lord and be able to look upwards and keep going. We keep going in the chaos and storms because we stand on the unshakable one, the rock of ages.
Gavin Calver there of Evangelical Alliance, the main speaker at that Prayer for Our Leaders event in Belfast this spring. Good response to that event? Good fallout from that event, do you think?
Yeah, I think Gavin doesn't miss the mark, and
he does not. No.
I think it certainly was challenging and inspiring to many people. Within the room there will have been, I loved his line, hope has a name and its name is Jesus. And, my own experience and many people in the room, have put our hope in money, which comes and goes, have put our hope in relationships, which can let you down, put our hope in politics. Look at everything going on right now, and if your hope is in stability in politics, that's going to come and go. And if we reframe our thinking and our hope is in Jesus, that from my experience has been unchangeable in a world that is changing all the time. Well, I think that for me has given me an assurance, a confidence, has given me a steadiness in the middle of the things that go up and down, and the interest rates that move, and the clients that come and go, or the deals that fall apart, or the economy around us that changes, and lots of things that I've had I wouldn't say the privilege, but to go through even in the last few years without the unchangeable hope of Jesus. I don't know how I would have got through it. And when, as Gavin talks and his next bit around, well, how do we model that out to people around us? I wouldn't want anyone to go through some of the things that I've gone through without having Jesus. And that makes it an easy thing to talk about, because it's been the single most thing in my life that's kept me on track and kept me steady through the highs and lows, through the storms.
You're listening to The Commission Files. Time for a quick break.
His name meant son of encouragement. He was prepared to talk to an enemy.
My name is Saul. I must speak with the leaders of the way.
Really? Well, I think you may as well come in.
But Barnabas...
I doubt if Saul is planning to arrest us. Come in, Saul. We'll hear what you have to say.
And together they spread the good news. Commission presents Barnabas. You can hear this and other Bible dramas by Commission. Just search for Commission Bible Drama wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Commission Files with Will Leach, and I'm chatting with Daniel Jackson of the Genesis Network. Let's find out a little bit about Daniel Jackson, the man, the son, the husband, the father, the entrepreneur, the business leader, the follower of Jesus. What's your faith story?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home and gave my life to the Lord fairly early as a child. I was in a great home and messed about a little bit in sort of teenage years and that kind of thing, and came back. I hadn't sort of really gone away from the Lord, but I was just maybe not applying my faith very seriously through that time of my life. Came back to the Lord, maybe in my late teens then. Had a faith that was probably a Sunday faith and a read your Bible as much as you can faith. Hadn't ever really considered too much how that applies into my day-to-day life outside of that I try and pray and try and read my Bible. Which then, whenever storms come, things happen, you get highs, you get lows. I hadn't learned how to really apply it. I hadn't learned how to look for Jesus in my day-to-day. I hadn't learned at that stage of my life about what my identity was in Christ as his child. And again, looking at the storms of life, whenever we know who we are, whenever we've committed our life to Jesus and we've accepted the promises of God in our life and we know that we're adopted into his family, we are his children, then the things that don't go well or that go well and the successes that come, we have that steadiness of knowing who we are. And that's been my experience then sort of through my 20s and 30s of developing that out as knowing who I am as a child of God, knowing that his love covers me. His love is deep and wide and high and low, and it covers me. And without knowing that love, then it's very hard to apply things of faith to then bring into your everyday life without knowing who you are and really accepting the love of God for you. So my journey from getting saved early, messing about a bit, coming back to God as a nominal Christian through to accepting who I am and accepting God's love for me, and then going maybe beyond that to really seek the union of God throughout a day. Again, regardless of whether things are going well in the day or things aren't going well, to try and press into the presence of God in a day, to try and press into his Holy Spirit with us in the day. And again, when it comes back then to business and to leadership and things like that, whenever things go well or don't go well, just trying to be in union with God throughout the day for me has been certainly something that has been able to keep me on a straight and narrow, keep me steady, keep me mentally probably well in ups and downs and all of that kind of thing, knowing who I am and seeking after the presence of God in each day to keep me on track.
You have a family?
I have a family. My wife, Danielle, so it's easy to remember. We call her Danny. And 3 kids, Kimberly, Benjamin and Abigail, all in primary school. So it's a good full life.
Why the business world? Because I don't know what it was like when you were growing up, but when I was growing up, the careers teachers said, do you want to be a teacher, fireman, policeman? Do you want to be an engineer? Do you want to do medicine? Do you want to be a lawyer? And then they ran out of ideas.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be any of those. Look at me.
Well, I think it was probably a mixture of things. I wasn't academic at school. We've had dyslexia and that kind of thing, and we struggled to pay attention and things like that. And going through school, I was there for the fun rather than for the work, and it just didn't click with me. So I came out of school and went down a more vocational route, probably because there wasn't, university wasn't likely going to be an option. A-levels weren't going to be an option, that kind of thing. So that brought me into a world of more vocational work and study. And again, I went to the sort of school that if you were a girl and you were that way, then you push towards hairdressing or, that kind of thing, which is great, but, they maybe didn't have other ideas for you. And if you were a boy, you got pushed towards a trade. And I went towards the trade end of things, went into construction services and tech and that sort of thing. But I always just had, I guess, an entrepreneurial sort of spark in me that, I looked at something and wanted to see how could I do that differently, or, looked at someone doing something and thought I could do that. So there's probably a mixture of needs must. If I was going to do something, I was going to have to do it myself. I was going to have to carve it out myself. And there was probably also a bit of pride in thinking, well, if people around me, if teachers, if whatever, didn't think I was going to be up to much, well, I'll get stuck in and see if I can prove them wrong.
I'll show you.
Yeah, there's probably a bit of that, a bit of needs must and a bit of I'll show you, I guess, that brought me into the entrepreneurial world.
The business you do now, tell us about it, describe it, because again, it's not something you'd instinctively think of if you weren't a business leader. Yeah,
so the journey into business was through that sort of construction side of things, from sort of trade through to building up a construction business. Then we had a whole sort of series of events of things that I was pressing into God for that we felt as we looked at business and we looked at, well, why do we do business? Or, what does it look like to give business over to God and to be directed by Him in what we do? That long story, but led us into looking at, well, within Belfast, how do we take sites and areas in Belfast that maybe have high levels still of dereliction and deprivation, and how do we start to look at regenerating some of those spaces? So that brought us into a crazy sort of journey, which turned out to be at a really difficult time just before COVID and all of that led us into sort of buying sort of former sites with colourful histories, maybe with histories that are linked to troubles in Northern Ireland.
So if I go up through the newspaper cuttings, those sites are probably mentioned for horrible things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started looking at, well, how do we take some of these sites and look to maybe remove a building that's a negative shrine to a past, and how do we change it into something that's positive for the future? So we went on a long journey with that, and that was a real missional sort of step out for us. COVID hit, and coming out of COVID, cost inflations went up maybe 50% within our industry, and other issues with Northern Ireland water and interest rates and all of that kind of thing. So it's been an interesting journey at the time in my life where I stepped out the most to do something that I thought was what God would have me do. Also led to a time that brought the most challenge and the most difficulty, which has been a big shaper for me in my faith as well, because I probably went into that assuming that if we go all in here and we do it for the glory of God, it'll absolutely work out the way I've written it, and it'll be, it will be easier than going and doing something else in my own strength. Whereas actually there's been a lot of difficulties. So we're still working through that. There's been a lot of loss in that. There's been a lot of stripping in that. But yeah, God's given us a vision to see sort of the dark corners of the city lit up, and how do we do that? Whether the time is now, whether our vision is delayed a little bit, but how do we light up those dark corners in the city with something that's positive, something that brings employment, something that brings housing, something that brings life to areas where there's been some dereliction?
As a citizen, I'm delighted to hear you talk like that, because our instinct is to look around us and wring our hands and say, oh, what a state the place is in, and then complain that others aren't doing enough to deal with it, whereas your instinct is to, what can I do, what can we do in partnership, what could we achieve? You've mentioned several times about the things you've gone through in recent years in business terms, and you've talked about lows as well as highs. What happened? What went wrong?
Well, maybe my personality is also the sort that I go all in, and whenever we sort of felt like we got this vision and that we were going to do this for the glory of God, I definitely went all in terms of putting certainly all our resources in, all our effort in to seeing these things done. And just then, at the time that we had done that, COVID had hit, and we had to sort of cash flow through that and not be able to bring in the investment that we were planning to bring in while this world pandemic was going on, and then into cost inflations and interest rates within the 2 years that followed that. We just had a lot of things that we should have had built and delivered by now that are still waiting, and there's been a lot of difficulties in that, a lot of loss in that, and yeah, we've certainly had to talking about the storms of life, we've had to look at Jesus in the boat and say, are we going to trust you no matter what?
Has it made you fear for your own income, for your own family, for how you keep where you live and what you drive and what the kids have and need?
Well, we've been through over the last number of years. We've had times where we've been through all that, where we've had to come out of our home that we were in, where we've, nice cars are swapped out with not so nice cars, and, a couple of years that we weren't getting paid at all to do it, and we've had to go through all that.
Imagine that. Most people listening think, what if my monthly salary didn't come in, what would I do? And that's the kind of thing business leaders who take risks inevitably face.
Yeah, that's part of being in business. And on the other hand, then there'll be years where we do better than expected, and it's that up and down where especially in the business world, and that's why we have the Genesis Network, who understand each other's journey, because we can also celebrate the times when we have a year that was better than we expected, and we have some deal that changes the game for us that we mightn't want to talk to others about because it feels like we're boasting, or it feels like they'll think then we've got it all set, but we know there'll be another year that things don't work out and that it's difficult. So that's why we have the Genesis Network as that sort of accountability network to bounce these things around. And
when it's happening to you, the difficult stuff, how do you guard against it taking over your whole life, every waking thought, every I should be sleeping but I'm not sleeping thought? How do you keep your eyes fixed on the people around you who need you, on the God you worship?
Yeah, and I think, I'm talking about this in particular. This is, the last few years, particularly sort of 2 of those years that were particularly bad. And I certainly had times within that, and at the start of it especially, that it was sleepless nights, and it was, physically and mentally, my health was not where it should have been because I had let it get to me. And I think within that, I chose to allow God to do a work in me, to accept that as his child, as Gavin said in one of his quotes, you can lose everything and lose nothing. To accept that that's the unshakable thing in my life, that regardless of what's going on, regardless of money and power and success and relationships and all that kind of thing, that no matter what, I have him as my hope, as my anchor in it all, and that identity, that knowing I'm loved, allowed me to open my hands and say, well, God, if I got into all this to try and bring you glory and to do something to build kingdom, well, then it is yours. If this business is mine, and it's only, and it is my responsibility, but if it's all mine and if it's only for me, then I should feel pretty stressed about this. But if I'm opening my hands and saying, God, this is yours, to do what you have with, then there's been some level of comfort in that, and knowing that I do what I can, I do all that I can, but outside of that, well, God, this is yours. I've got open hands.
Going to get ideological with you, but you're not to panic. You're a Christian in business, but the Christian life can't be purely a capitalist one. How do you balance that? It's commerce. It's profit and loss. It's do a deal. It's be honest, but you got to make a profit. That's how the world turns in economic terms. But that isn't everything, and it isn't all. How do you balance that?
Yeah, and that's a really hard one as a capitalist at heart, but with a socialist view as well. I always talk about the love your neighbour sort of capitalism, that, I believe, we should use what we have, use the talents that we have to create more value, but with the heart of Jesus, looking out for the broken. I always come back to Isaiah 61, those first 2 verses, and that then Jesus quoted in Luke at the start of his ministry, that basically he's coming, anointed by the Holy Spirit, coming to do the things that it says in Isaiah 61, to release the captives, to feed the poor, to look after the widows, all of those things. So I think that we can look at what we have in our hands and say, how do we multiply this? How do we give our talents to God? How do we invest well? How do we use what we have to build business? Look through the Bible. You've got Paul, you've got Aquila and Priscilla, you've got all of these entrepreneurs in the Bible that funded ministry, that whether that was funding other people's ministry or used the places that they worked and the businesses that they did to advance faith and kingdom work. And I think we can do that while looking out for people, while looking out for not just what we do with a check at the end of the year because we made money and we're able to give money away to something good, but what do we do as we run our businesses to try and help the community around us, to try and make spaces better for people, to try and break off some of those chains that hold people and create opportunities for people.
What would you say your biggest lesson has been through all this process? I know that one of them, and maybe it's your biggest one, is when you write a business plan, because you have to, and think how we're going to do the next 3-5 years, whatever. You're dealing with a God who may have other plans.
Yeah, I think certainly having to be open-handed, I think it's good to plan, but we have to be able to have open hands and say, God, this is yours. If there's a different angle you want to take on this, if there's a way you want to guide me in this, well, I'm handing it over to you. And within that, it took me many years to give up the right to understand what God was doing. And I feel like I've got leadership qualities. I'm, have a bit of a visionary, that sort of thing. That's the sort of stuff that I like. So God, you should involve me. If we're going in a direction here that I didn't see our journey turning into COVID and build costs that didn't work anymore because it had skyrocketed and interest rates then the turn. I didn't see that. So God, where are we going now? What are we doing in this? And I haven't felt always like I've had an answer to that. And I wrestled against God for that many times, and having to come to the place of realizing that I don't have the right to know everything that God's going to do in it, whether that journey goes in a different direction or not, or whether God's going to do a work in my heart in that part of the journey that I didn't know needed done. But trying to say, okay, I give up the right to know everything you're doing, and I don't need you to consult me in every area that we go into, or tell me why this or why that. I'm going to try and be faithful. And a line that comes through my head regularly is that God didn't call me to be successful, He called me to be faithful. And that doesn't mean we won't be successful, and that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with being successful. I think we should be successful, but as we go through stuff and as we have bumps in the road and that kind of thing, it's His faithfulness that He's called us to more than the success. He's called us to be faithful over successful, and I believe the success will come as well. But being faithful is really what I've had to try and press into.
Just to let you know that if you ever give up on what you're doing, there's always the motivational speaking, because I think you could make a go at it. When you meet someone who's a Christian running a business or a big responsibility in one, they're a person who wants to do the right thing and make a difference and provide a place for people to thrive and learn and earn, of course. It must be reassuring that you can offer something, a network that helps.
Absolutely. There's just so many people out there that are drowning in stress and in stuff that's challenging and feeling very alone. And the Genesis Network has been a place where we can just wrap some support around, be a listening ear, build friendships and relationships with people that are like for like, that understand each other.
Has it surprised you? The talent, the experience, the wisdom, the know-how that I've seen this before that's out there in the business world and among people of faith?
Yeah, and I think maybe part of coming, to founding the Genesis Network as well was realising that my own experience hadn't necessarily been what everyone else had. So I had the blessing of having family in business, and my grandfather helped me get started when I was 18. He is a successful business guy, sat with me to show me how to keep the books and, all that kind of thing, and created some opportunities for me and things like that. And I always had that to come back to if I needed to bounce something around, if I needed advice, if I needed just to talk to someone that understood it. My grandfather was my mentor in that sense, and I had maybe taken that for granted and assumed that everyone had someone like that in their life. But, the more people that I got to know in the business world, the more I realised how rare that was, and what I had experienced in having someone in my corner from a faith perspective, but that had a wealth of information and knowledge and experience in business was quite rare. So that, I guess, was an inspiration as well to make sure that we could create spaces for other people to have that, and that's within our hubs. We also have a mentoring program that runs with Genesis and other things. So probably my own experience in that and realising that was maybe a rare thing to have was part of fueling that.
So you're still learning. People are occasionally coming to you as a network, never mind you as Daniel, and just saying, have you thought about this? You know what, maybe you don't want to be doing so much of that.
Absolutely. And I think that's, back to the open hands thing with business. We've set out within the Genesis Network a mission plan and, aims and activities that fall under those aims. But we're also, continuing to try and hand it over to God and say, well, this is yours. We're doing this because we want to advance your kingdom in the marketplace on the island of Ireland. So if this is yours, if there's something that needs to close down, or if there's something that needs to start up, guide us and show us what that is. And we're also privileged to have a lot of wisdom around us from people that have been doing business and leadership for a long time, that we get to speak in to what we're doing, and that's really valuable.
I firmly believe that there will be someone listening to this, actually think there'll be many people listening to this who are thinking, at last, the network I think that might be for me.
You can check out our website, thegenesisnetwork.com, and again, Genesis Network on social media. You'll find us with hubs throughout Northern Ireland that meet monthly. Next month, we're moving into our first sort of in-person events in the south of Ireland as well. So we have an online prayer meeting once a week that you could join from anywhere. So if you're within the island of Ireland and you are in the business place and you're a person of faith and would like to explore what it would be like to have that community around you, whether you could look at our website and find that there is a location near you, or maybe you're somewhere in Ireland that there is no location near you, but you'd like to help explore how this could maybe happen, we'd love to talk to you. Also, if you're a person who isn't of faith in the business community and you think this is all interesting but it's alien to me and you'd like someone to talk to and bounce this stuff around, please do get in touch with us.
Daniel, thank you for explaining it to me so well and talking about your life so candidly. And thank you for joining me in the Commission Files. I do hope you've enjoyed it. And thank you for listening to the Commission Files. Don't forget our newly redesigned website, commissionradio.org. You'll find links to our YouTube channel, Instagram and Facebook pages, details of our studios, the latest news. There are even pictures of many of our guests, including our Daniel here. And you can listen to all our podcasts of the Commission Files and our Bible drama series. And there are some action shots of people acting for radio. And you've got to admit, you don't see a lot of that. Take a look, and I'll be back with the next episode soon. Bye.